Hello and welcome to a tutorial on how to make this cool fire material. It's fully procedural and you can apply it to any object. So to begin with, we're just going to add in a monkey as a mesh object and shade smooth. Press Ctrl 2 to give it two subdivisions. And next we're going to add in a camera, and over in the properties we're going to change it to 18mm and then Ctrl A to clear the transforms, and then RX 90 to rotate it 90 degrees on the X-axis. And then going to split the view and go into camera view and just clean up with the toolbars we don't need or the overlays. This is going to be the rendered view, and then move the camera back on the Y-axis until we center Suzanne in the middle of the camera there. Next we're going to rotate the monkey 45 degrees on the Z-axis and then change the left view to the shader editor and press N to hide the side panel. Next we're going to add in a new material, and the first thing we're going to do is delete the principled BSDF and add in a volume scatter node and connect that to the volume in the output. I'm just going to change the density to 4.5, and just to note, I've got an HDRI set up as the default lights in this scene. You can get them from anywhere. Next we're going to add in a noise texture and the mapping and coordinates. Set that to object and plug that into the color of the volume scatter node. Next we're going to add in a color ramp and just bring the black slider over to about 0.5. As you can see, that will cut away parts of the smoke effect or fire effect, so that it looks like we've got some holes going through the model. And if we control click, we can add another tab to the color ramp, and we can change this second one to a sort of reddish orange color. You don't have to be exact with this, but the color stops are about 0.5 for the black and about 0.6 for the reddish orange. You can always fine tune these values later if you want to. And we can bring the white tab over a little bit, so we just have a slight hint of the white areas coming through on our fire material. Next we're going to turn the detail on the noise texture all the way up to the max, and the roughness to around 0.7. I'm just going to adjust these color tabs again, and then for the distortion we can go anywhere from 0.7 to about 1.5. Looks good. And again, just adjust the color tabs so you get a good effect. Next we're going to add in an emission shader and a transparent shader. Use Shift to select both and press Ctrl 0 to add in a mix shader between them, and we're going to plug that into the surface. Next we're going to connect up the color ramp to the emission shader. Duplicate the color ramp with Shift D and press backspace on the title to reset it. Then we're going to flip the ramp so the white's on the left, and then plug that into the mix shader that's controlling the emission and transparent materials. Okay, next we're going to crank up the emission strength. Most values look pretty good up to about 20 for this. I normally go for somewhere between about 15 and 17. And there's a very important step that I've just cut away to here. The transparent material, we need to bring the white value down to something like a 0.5. Otherwise, when you render, it won't look anything like what you've got in the viewport. Next, we're going to change the noise texture to 4D, so we get the W value exposed. And we're going to add a driver, so we can type in hashtag frame divided by 300. And this will mean that when we play the animation, it changes the seed value and we get different looks. It will take the frame value and divide it by the number we put in. So a higher value, the slower it goes. We want something that moves quite gradually, as fire tends to sort of creep and move around like that. Next, we're going to add in a displace node. Connect that into the output, and then plug the noise into the height. And we won't see anything just yet. So if we go over to the Material tab and scroll down to Settings, we need to change that to Displacement and Bump, and then we can reduce the scale to something around a 0.3 seems to work. 0.3, 0.4, and you'll see when we play now it distorts that monkey head, and that is relevant to the subdivision surface that we added earlier. So if it's not working well, you may need to subdivide the model. Next, we're going to change the render samples down to 1 and turn on denoise. And we're going to need to take a render so that we can use the compositor. And under the color management, we're using very high contrast under the Filmic tab. Over in the Compositor, we're going to close all the unnecessary windows, just going to right click and join areas, and then close the side panel with N, and then click the checkbox for use nodes. And I'm just going to spread these out over here. Shift right drag to add in a reroute node, and then we're going to plug that into a viewer node so we can see our render in the background. Next, we're going to add in a glare node and set it to fog glow. Change the default to higher, mix to around 0.4, and the size to 9. Seems to work quite well. The higher you go with the mix value, the more like lava it starts to look. So if you're going for that sort of look instead, you can do that. Just going to add in a hue saturation value node and crank the brightness to 1.5. Now to animate this, we're going to go back to the Layout tab and bring up a timeline in the second window. Again, just close the unnecessary side panels that we're not going to be using. And change the range from 0 to 300 frames. I'm just going to change the view back to a 3D viewport on the left. So on frame 1, we're going to add a keyframe, and then on frame 300, we're going to add a keyframe after rotating it 359 degrees. And we can see that now rotates in front of the camera with the material moving and the displacement moving. Underneath the render output settings, I'm going to navigate to a folder I've got. You can't see it here because I'm only recording the Blender window, but I've got a folder set up for the image sequence, and I'm going to render all of the animation out as PNG images to that folder. Once that's done, we can swap over to an image sequencer on the left and change it to sequencer and preview, and then load in all of those images from frame 0 to 300. You can also add a background in here if you want, and it's important to turn off the look that you've got under color management, otherwise you'll get a double effect going on. If you drag the timeline, you can see in the preview what it's doing. And then in the output, we can change that to FF MPEG and MPEG 4 under the encoding. And under the view settings, we can then sequence render animation. And that will just render out slowly. And save it to your desktop as an MP4. I'll just show you quickly the a sped up version of this, of the rendered out version, which you saw at the beginning. That's it. And then you can also apply this material to other things. So I've got this Blender logo here that I've done another version on. Hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching. Take care.